Well, Pam said she was coming. This is like the worst time of the year. Everybody's away.
You're expecting 60-mile-an-hour winds and rain, so.
Good morning. Shabbat Shalom. How's Mom?
Actually, okay. You're supposed to have an old friend come over today. The weather is coming today, so actually, it's still better than 6. Oh, it's the wind. Wind crossing is 6 this way. He's hurrying.
Okay. Oh, she's having a play date. Speaking of mothers,
Morning.
good morning.
Shabbat Shalom.
We do not want to discuss your weather. How's that? Could be worse. We could live in Kentucky where it's flat now.
Oh, I heard just now, actually. Wow. Wow. What's that? 200-mile tornado, like wide swath.
Mm-hmm.
Unbelievable. Oh, I'm still having trouble with this flip book.
Thank you. Good morning, Luba.
I don't know, I can't seem to get it to work.
What are you trying to get to work?
The flip book, the prayer book, but it keeps
Okay.
on crashing out. I wish I could just buy it from Kindle or Amazon or somebody.
You can.
I couldn't find it. I don't know. I'm tired of it. I mean, it keeps crashing all time yesterday, today. What page are we starting on?
Okay, here you go. That's a link to the Kindle version.
I know, but I have to go off this to get to it. So,
Hmm?
you email it to me or what? Or you put it in the chat?
I just put it in the chat. I can email it to you if you want.
Yeah, email it because I have to get into the chat and then.
Not like I'm busy or anything.
Well, we can do it later. Don't do it now. It's horrible. It just, all of a sudden it'll come out like with a black page like that. I-
Conversation sound familiar?
Rabbi,
Yeah.
could you make translations that we talked yesterday make available to the people of temple people so they can see that translation could be differently read in Noah?
Yeah.
It would be nice.
It was chapter 9, right?
Yes, chapter 9, I think 5, number 5.
Okay, there you go. It's in the chat there.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Welcome. All who are here at Temple and those joining us via live stream. We'll begin this morning with Ma Tovu on page 74. Ma Tovu, Ohalecha Yaakov, Ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael. Ma Tovu, Ohalecha Yaakov, Ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael. Page 76. So you join in our blessing that thanks God for the intricate nature of our bodies and all of the systems that work together, and how thankful we are when everything works as it should. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher yetzar et ha'adam b'chokhmah, uvaravo nekavim nekavim chalulim chalulim, galui v'yadua lifnei chisei chavodecha, she'im mefatech echad mehem o yisatem echad mehem, אי אפשר להתקיים לעמוד לפניך, ברוך אתה אדוני רופא כל בשר ומפליא לעשות. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who formed the human body with skill, creating the body's many pathways and openings. It is well known before your throne of glory that if one of them be wrongly opened or closed, it would be impossible to endure and stand before you. Baruch atah Adonai rofeh chol basar umafli la'asot. And our blessing for our souls, that which makes us the people that we are. Bar Elohai neshama shenatata bi torahi, ata vrata, ata yitzarta, ata nafachta bi, va'ata mishamra bekirbi, kol zman neshama bekirbi, מודה אני לפניך, אדוני אלוהי ואלוהי אבותיי ואמותיי, ריבון כל המעשים, אדון כל הנשמות. ברוך אתה, אדוני אשר בידו נפש כל חי, ורוח כל בשר איש. My God, the soul you have given me is pure. You created it, you shaped it, you breathed it into me, and you protect it within me. For as long as my soul is within me, I offer thanks to you, Adonai, my God and God of my ancestors, source of all creation, sovereign of all souls. Baruch atah Adonai asher biyado nefesh kol chai, v'ruach kol basar ish. We turn to page 80 for the Nesim B'chol Yom. Pam, do you want to join me? Awesome. Thank you.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu. Asher natan l'sakvi bina l'chavhin ben yom uven laila.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam pokeach ivrim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zokef kefufim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam rokah haaretz al hamayim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamechin mitzadei gaver.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam malbish arumim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hanoten li'aev koach.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hama avir shenai me'enai utnuma me'afapai.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sha'asani b'tselem Elohim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shesanu b'chorin.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sha'asani Yisrael.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ozir Yisrael b'gvura.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam oter Yisrael b'tifara. And on page 86, we join in our blessing for study and for worship. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Adonai our God, let the words of Torah be sweet in our mouths and the mouths of your people Israel, so that we, our descendants, and the descendants of all your people Israel may know you by studying your Torah for its own sake. Baruch atah Adonai hamlamed Torah la'amo Yisrael. We turn together to page 94. Baruch Shamar v'hayaholam Baruch Hu. Blessed is the one who spoke, and the world came to be. Blessed is the one. Let's join together. Blessed is the one who continually authors creation. Blessed is the one whose word is deed. Blessed is the one who decrees and fulfills. Blessed is the one who is compassionate towards the world. Blessed is the one who is compassionate towards all creatures. Blessed is the one who rewards the reverent. Blessed is the one who exists for all time, ever enduring. Blessed is the one who redeems and saves. Blessed is God's name. With songs of praise we extol you and proclaim your sovereignty. For you are the source of life in the universe. One God, life of the universe, praised and glorious ruler, your name is eternal. Baruch atah Adonai melech mechulal batishbachot. Page 96. Mizmor shir leyom haShabbat, tov lehodot laHadonai. ולזמר לשמך עליון, לזמר לשמך עליון, להגיד בבוקר חסדך, ואמונתך בלילות, עלי אסור ועלי נבל, עלי היגיון בכינור. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, לזמר לשמך עליון. Continuing with Ashrei, page 97.
אשרי יושבי ביתך, עוד יהללוך סלה.
אשרי העם שככה לו, אשרי העם שאדוני אלוהיו.
תהילה לדוד, ארוממך אלוהיך המלך, ועברך שמך לעולם ועד.
בכל יום אברכך, ואהללה שמך לעולם ועד.
גדול אדוני ומהולל מאוד, ולגדולתו אין חקר.
דור לדור ישבח מעשיך, וגבורתך יגידו.
הדר כבוד הודיך, ודברי נפלאותיך עשיך.
וזוז נוראיתך יאמרו, וגדולתך אספרנה.
זכר רב טובך יביעו, וזדקתך ירננו.
חנון ורחום אדוני, ערך אפיים וגדול חסד.
טוב אדוני לכל, ורחמיו על כל מעשיו.
ידוך אדוני כל מעשיך, וחסידיך יברכוך.
כבוד מלכותו יאמרו, וגבורתך ירברו.
להודיע לבני אדם גבורותיו, וכבוד הדר מלכותו.
מלכותך מלכות כל עולמים, וממשלתך בכל דור ודור.
סומך אדוני לכל הנופלים, וזוקף לכל הכפופים.
עיני כל אליך יסברו, ואתה נותן להם את אבלם בעתו.
פותח את ידיך, ומשביע לכל חיי רצון.
צדיק אדוני בכל דרכיו, וחסיד בכל מעשיו.
קרוב אדוני לכל קורב, לכל אשר יקראו באמת.
רצון יראיו יעשה, ואת שבעתם ישמע וישין.
שומר אדוני את כל אוהב, ואת כל רשעים ישמיד.
תהילה אדוני ידבר פי, ויברכו בשר שם קדושו לעולם ועד.
ואנחנו נברך יה, מעתה ועד עולם. הללויה. הללויה, 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 אל בקודשו, הללויה, הללויה, ברקיע עוזו. הללויה, 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 בגבורותיו, הללויה, הללויה, קרוב גודלו. הללויה, 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 בתקע שופר, הללויה, הללויה, בנבל וכינור. הללויה, 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 בטוב ומחול. הללויה, הללויה, במנים ועוגב. הללויה, 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 בצלצלי שמיים. הללויה, הללויה, בצלצלי תרועה. כל הנשמה תהלל יה, Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Page 105. Yishtabach shimcha leyahad malkeinu. You shall always be praised, great and holy God, our sovereign in heaven and on earth. Songs of praise and psalms of adoration become you, acknowledging your might and your dominion. Yours are strength and sovereignty, sanctity, grandeur, and glory, always. We offer our devotion, open our hearts in acclamation. We join together in Chatzi Kaddish on page 106. Please rise.
Yikadal v'yikadash shemei Rabba.
Amen.
B'yalma divrach hirutei, v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon uv'yamechon, uv'chayedecho beit Yisrael. Bagala, bagala, u'izman kariv, v'maru, amen. Yehi shmei Rabba mevorach, le'alam ulam me'amaya, yitbarak, yitbarak, v'yishtabak, v'yitpa'ar, v'yitramam, v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar, v'yithalel, v'yithalal, shemei d'kedusha
Barechu.
Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata,
Tushbechata v'nechemata, damiran v'yalma, v'yimeru, amen.
We continue standing for the call to worship, the Baruch Hu, on page 108. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Vaed. We continue with Yotzer Or on page 110. Please be seated. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Yotzer Or uvorei choshech, oseh shalom uvorei et hakol, hameir la'aretz v'ladarim aleha barachamim, uvtuvo mechadesh b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh v'reshit. Ma rabu ma'asecha Adonai, kulam b'chochma asita, mala ha'aretz kinyanecha. Titbarach Adonai Eloheinu al shevach ma'aseh yadecha, ve'al me'orei or she'asita yifa'arucha sela. Or chadash od Zion ta'ir, v'nizkeh chulanu mehera le'or'o, Baruch atah Adonai Yotzer HaMe'orot. Page 113. Love your neighbor as yourself, you said. And light-blinded, we saw that inner and outer worlds are one as you are one. You spoke, and we wrote. We reached for you down the centuries, your light moving before us as we climbed, fell back, and climbed again, your Sinai of life. Baruch atah Adonai, habocher ba'amo Yisrael, b'yahava. As we rise for Shema, page 114.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem, Kivod Malchuto, Leolam Vaed.
Please be seated as we continue with the Haftarah on the following page.
Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'odecha v'hayu ha'devarim ha'eleh asher anochi mitzavcha hayom al levavecha Vishinantam levanecha, v'dibarta bam. B'shivtecha b'vetecha, uvleftecha v'derech, ushochbecha uvkumecha. Ukshatam leot al yadecha, v'hayu latatafot bein einecha. Uktavtam al mezuzot beitecha, uvisharecha. Leman tizkaru ve'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'yitem kedoshim le'elohechem. Ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem le'elohim. Ani Adonai Elohechem.
Adonai Elohechem emet. When justice burns within us like a flaming fire, when love evokes willing sacrifice from us, when, to the last full measure of selfless devotion, we demonstrate our belief in the ultimate triumph of truth and righteousness, then your goodness enters our lives and we can begin to change the world. And then you live in our hearts, and we, through righteousness, behold your presence. Page 121. The eternal truth is that you alone are God, and there is none else.
May the righteous of all nations rejoice in your love and exalt in your justice.
Let them beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks.
Let nation not lift up sword against nation, nor learn war anymore.
You shall not hate your brother or your sister in your heart.
The stranger that sojourns with you shall be accepted as your equal, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt.
Why do you crush my people and oppress the poor? Asks God.
We know that the Eternal One defends the poor and upholds the rights of the needy.
Praise to God Most High.
Blessed is God and deserving of blessing.
We join in our Song of Freedom on page 122.
I'll let you start.
Okay. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nehedar b'kodesh, nora tehilot, oh seifele, oh seifele. שירה חדשה שיבחו גולים לשמך שפת הים, יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד.
Tzor Yisrael, Kuma Bezrat Yisrael, Ufdechinu Mecha Yehuda v'Yisrael, Go Aleinu Adonai Zevaot Shemo, Kedosh Yisrael, Baruch Atah Adonai, Ga'al Yisrael.
We rise together for Amidah.
Adonai sifatach tiftach ufi yagita hilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'Konei HaKol, V'Zocher Chasdei Avot v'Imahot, Umevi Gula Lifnei V'Nehem, Lama'an Shemo Be'ahava, Melech Hoser Umoshiach Umagen, Baruch Atah Adonai, Magayin Avraham V'Ezrat Sarah, Atah Gibor Le'elam Adonai, Mechaye hakol atarav lehoshia. Mashiva ruach umarit hagashem. Mechachel chayim bechesed. Mechaye hakol berachamim rabim. So make noflim verefei cholim. Umatir asurim. Umekayem emunato lishenei afar michamocha ba'al kivurot umidel melach melech meimid umechayeh umatzmiya Yeshua v'ne'eman ata l'chayot hakol Baruch atah Adonai Mekayeh hakol. Nekadesh et shimcha ba'olam Kashem shemakdishim oto bishmei marom Kakatuv al yad neviecha V'karazel ze ve'amar Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzivot, Melochol haaretz, Kivodo. Adir, Adoreinu, Adonai, Adonenu, Ma'adir, Shimcha b'chol haaretz. Baruch kivod Adonai mimkomo. Echad hu Eloheinu, hu Avinu, hu Malkeinu, hu Moshienu, v'hu Yashmienu, barahamav le'nei kol chai. Ani Adonai Elohechem. Yimloch Adonai leolam, Elohai Zion, ledor vador, Hallelujah. Ledor vador nagid Gad lecha, ul netzah netzachim, kedishata nagdish, v'shivchacha Eloheinu, mipinu lo yamush, leolam va'ed.
Baruch atah Adonai Ha'el HaKadosh. We continue on page 132. You can please be seated. Pam, what are we going to do? Yismechu or
Let's do Vishamru.
the Shamra? Okay.
It's a little bit easier to sing.
Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asod et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Beini uvein b'nei Yisrael oti leolam, oti leolam. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asod et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim v'et ha'aretz v'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asod et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Uvayom hashvi'i Shabbat vayinafash, Shabbat vayinafash, Shabbat vayinafash, v'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asod et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Page 135. We offer thanks, O God, for this Shabbat, which unites us in faith and hope, for Shabbat holiness, which inspires sacred living, for Shabbat memories, glowing even in darkness, for Shabbat peace, born of friendship and love. We offer thanks and blessing, O God. Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat. Page 139. For the expanding grandeur of creation, worlds known and unknown, galaxies beyond galaxies, filling us with awe and challenging our imaginations.
Modim anachnu lach.
For this fragile planet Earth, its times and tides, its sunsets and seasons.
Modim anachnu lach.
For the joy of human life, its wonders and surprises, its hopes and achievements.
Modim anachnu lach.
For human community, our common past and future hope, our oneness transcending all separation, our capacity to work for peace and justice in the midst of hostility and oppression.
Modim anachnu lach.
For high hopes and noble causes, for faith without fanaticism, for understanding of views not shared.
Modim anachnu lach.
For all who have labored and suffered for a fairer world, who have lived so that others might live in dignity and freedom.
Modim anachnu lach.
We pray that we may live not by our fears, but by our hopes, not by our words, but by our deeds. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha, ulecha na'eh lehodot. Sim, sim, sim shalom, sim, sim, sim shalom, tova uveracha. Sim, sim, sim shalom, sim,
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 sim.
sim shalom, tova uveracha. We take a few moments for silent prayer. O Hoseh Shalom Bimromav, Uyaseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'imru, Imru, Amen. Yahaseh Shalom, Yahaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Yahaseh Shalom, Yahaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Shabbat Shalom. We are in Parshat Vayigash, which is on page 286 of the Plaut Commentary. It's Genesis chapter 44. I can put the link up in the chat box. Okay, here you go. There you are. So the link is there up in the chat box. So this is the continuing saga of Joseph, and Joseph is now well as the vice president or second in command, whatever title, is there in Egypt, and his brothers have approached him for assistance, not knowing, of course, it's their long-lost brother Joe. And really, this first part begins as we essentially fulfill the prophecy that Joseph had many, many years ago when he said that his brothers would bow down to him. And this is, in fact, exactly what's happening here. The brothers are all bowing down to him. They're asking him for food. Joseph provides a bit of a test for them, saying, leave your youngest brother here and go back and, And here we have Judah redeeming himself a little bit for the wrongs that he may have caused when he didn't stand up for Joseph all those many years ago, when he actually stands up and speaks on behalf of his brothers and his brother Benjamin and his father, saying, look, I can't go back without the kid because otherwise it's going to kill my father. And that, in Joseph's eyes, I think, is the turning point. And that's when Joseph, begins to realize that the brothers have, in fact, changed. They are remorseful, and there's no way that he can do that. So, what's the next? There's a rather dramatic moment. Beginning of chapter 45, where we read, Joseph could no longer restrain himself before all who were standing in attendance on him, and so he cried, get everybody out, make them leave. And then there was nobody there, which means he clears the room, of all of the Egyptians. And Joseph then and only his brothers are there, and Joseph says to his brothers, let's do it in Hebrew. Vayomer Yosef el Echav. So Joseph said to his brothers, Ani Yosef, I'm Joseph. Ha'od avi chai, is my father really alive? V'lo yochlu achav la'avonot. And his brothers were unable to even respond, meaning that they are dumbfounded. La'avonot oto, and they kind of step back, and they're in shock. They're recoiling away from him. This text is problematic in so many ways, right? What was it that suddenly shocks Joseph into revealing himself?
Well, I guess at some point he had to reveal himself. I mean, I'm sure he wanted to at some point.
Well, he's second in command in Egypt. If I don't call my mother every other day or so, I'm in trouble. He's second in command in Egypt. He could have easily called home, or the ancient equivalent, right? There's nothing that would have prevented him from sending a messenger to Canaan to figure out what was going on, and in fact, confront his brothers with a force. He has certainly got those resources available to him, right? But he doesn't. He seems to have completely been absorbed in his own world of what was going on in Egypt. Remember, he takes on an Egyptian name, he has an Egyptian wife.
Couldn't he have risked everything he had, and he revealed everything he had previously had?
Right, so it could be. It could be that in order to be seen as a loyal Egyptian, he needed to be seen as an Egyptian. He couldn't be seen as this fifth column, or whatever you want to, whatever phrase we want to use, that could be loyal to some other entity outside the country. right? So it would have been perhaps dangerous for him. And this gets played out again in another story, right? What other story is exactly the same thing? Where we have somebody being in the royal position. Esther, exactly. This is the same story that plays out with Esther, right? Does Esther reveal herself, or does she maintain her comfy status? Does Joseph simply maintain his status and let the brothers starve? Or, I mean, he has several choices, right? He could not reveal himself, give the brothers the food that they want, and send them on their way. Could have done that. You know, there's no requirement that he actually reveal himself. They just needed the food. So he could have just fulfilled their request and sent them away. And yet it's this moment where Judah actually demonstrates that he's changed, that impacts Joseph tremendously. And Joseph is completely distraught. And then, verse 4, Joseph went on to say to his brothers, "Come close to me." So they drew near. He said, "I'm Joseph, your brother, whom you sold to Egypt. But don't worry about it."
See, he didn't really get sold to Egypt, he got left to die. And it just so happened that
He doesn't know that.
Okay.
Right? As far as he knows, he's in the pit.
It's all arranged.
He gets taken out of the pit and taken to Egypt by these Midianites. He has no idea what happened. Right? So in his mind, right, he doesn't know that Judah was distraught and came back and tried to, get him out of the pit, and by the time he got there, he wasn't there, and all the others. That whole rest of the story, which we have, Joseph doesn't. But he says, look, don't worry about it. Water under the bridge. Don't be troubled. Don't be chagrined because you sold me here. For it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. It's pretty, he's being pretty generous here.
So it goes with the frenzy and all the dreams and all the prophecies. He kind of saw it ahead of time, something like that was going to happen, he just didn't know how it was going to play out. So
Right, okay.
in his head, this is what was going to happen, it's just the mechanism we got there, I guess, doesn't upset me because at the end, it's what I expected to happen anyway.
So there are a couple ways we can read this. We could read this a little bit sarcastically. This is Joseph, right? Thanks, guys. You tried to sell me into slavery. Look like slavery to you? Don't worry about it, though. I know that you just sent me here ahead of you for me to be able to save your tush. Right? So, a little bit of it could be read as Joseph kind of getting back some of his own, and saying, because remember, Joseph is this very sort of arrogant character that dreams as a 17-year-old that all of his younger brothers are bowing down to him and all of this stuff. And now he's second in command in Egypt. So that's sort of played into his power plays and power games. And, now he goes on and he says there's been 2 years of famine in the land and we have 5 more years, and God sent me ahead of you to assure your survival in the land and to keep you alive for a great deliverance. Right? I'm your Savior. So it's not you who sent me here, but God, who has made me a father to Pharaoh and a lord of all his household, a ruler of the whole land of Egypt.
There's some serious ego right there.
Right? He's putting himself even above Pharaoh.
Yeah.
and we sort of in this story, we often just sort of glaze over this part. But and this is he makes himself a father to Pharaoh? Right? Can you imagine? He's standing there talking to this group of his brothers. None of the Egyptians are in the room, by the way, remember.
And everyone out of here.
Right? He threw everybody out of the room. So now he's just talking to the brothers. The brothers have no idea who he really is or what his status is. You can imagine that if Pharaoh's advisors were there listening to this conversation, and this second in command was saying, oh, well, I'm really the one in charge of the whole land, and I tell Pharaoh what to do. I mean,
He wouldn't be second in command anymore.
it doesn't work well. Right, and then,
Well, can I ask a question?
yeah.
Okay, so what's the lesson here? I mean, how can we apply this to us? And the reason I ask is I want to teach this tomorrow to my Gesher kids, while I'm teaching about the code of many colors. So what's the net out? What's the bottom line? What's the walkway?
Well,
I mean,
look, we all have, look, I think the lesson is further on, actually, as we go through. Because ultimately, what happens? Ultimately, what does Joseph do? Right? He ultimately forgives his brothers. They ultimately reconcile, and they work together to create, Jewish life in Egypt. Right? This section, this is a little bit of Joseph getting his own back. And I think it's fair. And the brothers have to hear it. Right? I think if you've wronged somebody, you've got to say you're sorry, and you've got to hear, what you've done and the effect that you've had on the person.
Well, what's funny is, in the early part, 289, Joseph says, bring the family here and be near me. And then the next paragraph, Pharaoh says, hey, tell your brothers to move here. I don't think Joseph said I already did. It's sort of like, I'm father to Pharaoh. Pharaoh actually did say what Joseph had already said in the next paragraph. Tell your family to move here.
Well, and it gets even more interesting because Joseph says to them, do this, load up your boats, your beasts, and head straight for the land of Canaan, and take your father, your households, and come to me, and I will give you the best land of Egypt offers.
Yeah, that was Pharaoh who said that.
Right. So Pharaoh's saying that. Pharaoh's saying, thank you, so I want your family here. Why does Pharaoh want his family there?
So he's not wanting somebody somewhere else.
Right. Right? Pharaoh's no slouch. Pharaoh knows full well that if Joseph's entire family is in Egypt under Pharaoh's rule, Joseph's in control. If his family is out of Pharaoh's sphere of influence, then Joseph is a loose cannon. Right? So, but by bringing the family there, he's controlled. And where does the family end up, by the way?
in like really nice pasture land.
But not where Pharaoh is. Right? They end up in the land of Goshen, a little bit further away, out of the sphere of royal palace and influence and all of that. Also strategic. Mm-hmm. Right, and where are we here? And we'll wrap up with this piece. So on page 290. So here we have just at the end of chapter 45, they went up from Egypt and they came to the land of Canaan, to Jacob their father. And when they told him Joseph is still alive and that he had held sway over the whole land of Egypt, his heart froze, for he could not believe them. But when they told him all that Joseph had spoken to them, and when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to convey him, their father Jacob's spirit came alive. Remember, because his spirit had been crushed when Joseph dies. Israel said, "Enough, my son Joseph is alive. I must go to see him before I die." Israel and all his company set off after their journey and blah, 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 blah. So keep going down. Right, okay. Okay, so here we go. God addressed Israel in night visions, saying, "Jacob, Jacob, Yaakov, Yaakov, Vayomer, Hineni." And as we know, Hineni is always the beginning of something bad. Because what ultimately is this the beginning of? Slavery, right? We're about to head to Egypt in order to become slaves. And so that's this, and the literary technique of, Jacob, Jacob, Avraham, Avraham, is not lost, right? Right? So, Jacob is about to sacrifice the entire community of Israel here in the same way Abraham was about to sacrifice Isaac. Hineni, we're ready. And then there's this fabulous, sort of moment when Jacob and Joseph, meet, and they have a great reunion. So, okay, Shabbat Shalom. And let's turn together to page 253. As we think of all those in our lives, those continuing to battle with COVID-19, caregivers, families, communities, and send our blessings of healing. Our blessings of healing out to them and to all who need it. And in our congregation, we especially think of Greg Bennett and Michael Byron, Scott Gordon, Rebecca Gottlieb, Phyllis Levin, Jacob Adams, Pat Hanna, Irina Shevritskaya, Doug Ford, Zachary Jackson, Bruce Harrell, Andrea Kempner-Blake, the Rodland family, Terry Harris, Jerry Penn, Frank Fusaro, Edna Fritz, Frank DeFazio, Matea Press, Joe Riley, Joseph Passetner, Edie Francis, Jim McCann, Sheila Cohn, Marilyn Weinecke, Diane Levy, and Jeannie Neibauer. And if you have names that you would like to share and you are joining us via our live stream, please enter them into the chat. And if you are here in person, please share a name if you wish. So we join in our blessing for healing. Mi sheberach
Avoteinu mikor habracha leimotenu.
May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mi sheberach imotenu mekor habracha leavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. We continue with Aleinu on page 282. Please rise.
Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol, lateit gdula yotzer breshit, shelo asanu k'goyei haratzot, velo samanu k'mishpachot adama, Shelo sam chalkeinu kahem, v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam. V'anachnu korim, u'mishtachavim u'modim, lifnei melech, malchei hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shehu Noteh Shamayim v'Yoser Haaretz, U'Moshav Yikaro b'Shamayim Ima'al, U'Shchinatu Zo, Begoveh Meheromim, Hu Eloheinu Ein Od, Emet Malkeinu Efes Ulato, Kakahatu Betorahato, V'yadata hayom v'hashevota elevavecha, Ki Adonai hu ha'Elohim, Bashamayim imahal, Ve'al haaretz mitachat ein od. V'nemar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz. Bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad, U'shemo echad. Please be seated as our thoughts turn now to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones, those who our friends and families, our neighbors have lost, martyrs of our people, and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and of death. We are in the period of Shloshim for Vivian Posek, Fran Porras, Bella Shivertskaya, and David Rothman. And we observed the following yahrzeits in our congregation: Sarah Kramer, S. Bell Cohn, Junior Schuster, Aline Stone, Sadie Stein, A.J. Sunstein, Albert Lobman, Abraham Schaffner, Charles Rosenzweig, Lillianne Parker, Pepe Burnham Buka, Louis Erschler, Caroline Gartner, Louis Zipman, Abraham Krohn, Nathan Jacobson, Jacob Zaslav, Cora Rosenthal, and Nathan Wolf. If you are joining us via live stream and you have a name that you would like to add, please add it into our chat box. If you are here in person and you would like to add a name, please do so. And we rise together for Kaddish, page 294. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, ba'alma divrach rutev yamlich marchotei, b'chayachon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael. Ba'agala v'zman kariv v'imru, amen. Yehe shmei Rabba mevorach la'olam u'lalmeh almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei d'kudsha barichu. La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tush b'chata v'nechamata. Damiran b'alma v'imru, amen. Yehe shlama Rabba min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. Please be seated. We will continue with Torah study in just a moment. Give me a minute or two to reset some of the technology, and we will be right back.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. How are you, Liliana? We've missed you.
Yeah, I know. I'm in Florida and I had a flight on Saturday. So,
Oh, okay. Well, I thought you were someplace different because your background is different.
oh, yeah. No
There's no
picture.
artwork. Yeah.
I know. The blank wall. Yeah.
Well, it must feel good to be able to travel.
Yeah. Now on the internet today, on the newspaper, these dire warnings about not traveling. First, but, I'm here till the end of March, so I'm hoping that,
It'll pass through.
I mean, we're bound to have more infections in the winter, we do.
Yeah. Yeah, you just have to be smart, which you are, about
Yeah.
exposure.
A friend of mine went to play bridge here. They have bridge here close to week. So, and I said, I'm not prepared to be in the room with people I don't know. We're touching the cards. We're all touching the same cards. That's not such a great idea. I can't, if you don't have to come back to me, it's just here in Florida, right?
Right.
So, most people are careful. I've noticed I went to Walmart and pretty low, 50% wearing a mask. And everybody worked there wearing a mask. So, as long as you're careful. Like, no, I joined the golf, which I hadn't done before, because I figured that's outside. If I join, then I'll probably play. If I don't join, I may not, It's like theater tickets. If you don't get the subscription, you don't go.
Right, right. You have to, yeah, you have to have that. Yeah,
So now I'm committed, so now I have to go.
yeah. Liliana, you may want to adjust your computer a little because it's a little bit hard to hear you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm probably
Or just
just far away. Yeah, I have to keep it on my lap then.
Yeah,
Oh,
much better.
Coffee table, but
yeah, I understand.
well,
That's better though.
yeah.
Yeah, much
No,
better.
and this is great because you're looking over Rob's shoulder, as you should be.
And it's on there now.
You're supposed to do
Are
this.
we? What chapter are we? Are we in 10? Yeah.
Not,
And-
not,
9.
All right.
9.
Okay.
Hi,
does
Brad.
anybody need the text?
I got it.
Joshua 8.
Okay.
Joshua 8 is Joshua 9.
Look for Joshua 9.
Here, Joshua 9.
Oh, 9. Oh,
Right.
oh, we're in 10.
I could be wrong.
I got 9 on my book.
We're at 9.
All right, Brad, your job is to make sure if anybody shows up as a participant, let me know because
will
I'm
do
looking
that.
this way and I don't see that part of the screen.
All is good.
Rabbi, I don't know if it is happen with everyone. I cannot see the Torah study unless I quit it and go away from Zoom and
Are you
restart.
on your phone?
Yes,
Yeah, that's why.
it is because iPhone. Okay,
Yeah.
because I have to quit all the programs, go away and start from the start so I can see.
You don't have to quit. You just have to make them minimize them. You don't have to quit them actually.
They know I continue seeing service views. I cannot see Torah study. But if I quit and come back, I can see Torah study.
Well, and we see you, so all is
Yeah.
good.
No,
Yeah.
I already done it. Thank you.
Yeah. Hold on, let me get this one.
What, just for me? Who cares?
Over here, this screen, here.
It's not in person. They don't need to see. They don't need to see me. He's setting up the other camera.
Good.
Are you the only one at the table, apart from Rabbi?
Pam's here, she's just not at the table yet.
Okay.
So I guess the answer to your question is actually yes.
Okay, yes.
We're in stealth mode.
Not many of us. Wow. So if this is, I thought we were on 10 because I thought we did 8 2 weeks ago.
But what comes after 8, 9?
Right? No, but that was 2 weeks ago. I
We never
wasn't.
finished 8 2 weeks ago, so we finished it last week.
Oh, okay. 'Cause I wasn't here. All right.
Who do we have? Who do we have? Hi, Eric. Hi, Sue.
Hi.
Hi, Luba.
Hi, Pam.
Hi, Kitty.
Eric, I am loving your book.
Oh, thank you.
I was reading about, I guess, France, and now I'm started on colonial America. Very interesting.
Thank you.
And your sense of humor, wow. Great sense of humor.
Thank you.
That does come through.
I'm blushing.
I wish I was like, in Paris with some baguettes or something.
I know. That, yeah, it does make you hungry, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Wow. Very interesting.
Could it be in the library, your book?
I have to ask them to put it in the library. I just went to my library in Meadville and asked if they had it. And they said, who's the author? And I said, well, okay, Eric Pallant. And they said, no, we don't have it. So,
Luba, just request at the library to get request a copy.
No, the Central Erie Library, if they have it, they can share with other Meadville and other smaller libraries.
Right.
When Erie Library have, they can share it. They have system computerized it and they can share. So
Right.
if it is possible to put in the Erie Library, they're going to be able to share with other.
you know what? I'll call them this week and I'll ask them. It's on my list of things I should get to.
Maybe in the library, I can ask them too.
Yeah, I had the same experience at Barnes and Noble. I went in, hey, there's this great book. And they're like, I'm sure it might be, but
They do actually,
Yes, we don't run out of time.
widely advertise it. You was not advertise it very much.
Right.
Because of that, they don't know. If it is widely advertised, they get it right away.
exactly.
Okay, let's jump in. We'll start with our blessing for study. Baruch atah
Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei
Torah. Excellent.
Amen.
Okay. So we are chapter 9 of Josh. We're on a first name basis right now. Yeah, well, Joe, we go way back. And this is in this continuing saga of the conquest, right? And it begins when all the kings west of the Jordan in the hill country, in the Shaphalah, and along the entire coast of the Mediterranean Sea up to the vicinity of Lebanon, the land of the Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, and the Hivites and the Jebusites learned of this. What did they learn about?
The taking of Ai.
Yeah, the destruction of Ai, right? They gathered with one accord to fight against Joshua and Israel.
Quick question. Can you, does Shephelah mean anything? in the hill country. You know, they call it,
Well, the Shvela is like the plains.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. And really what they're talking about is essentially saying across the land, right? Here's what was going on. And they had gathered together these various different peoples. And they were starting to hold this alliance to get rid of Joshua and these Israelites. Right? It has this modern echo to it, though, right?
Sounds like 1948.
Right, exactly. All you have to do is replace the names with, the people of Lebanon and Syria and, Jordan and etc. attacked the new state of Israel. But when the inhabitants of Gibeon learned how Joshua had treated Jericho and Ai, they, for their part, resorted to cunning. They set out in disguise. They took worn-out sacks for their asses and worn-out water skins that were cracked and patched. In other words, they made themselves look poor, right?
Mhm.
They had worn-out patched sandals on their feet and threadbare clothes on their bodies, and all the bread they took on provision was dry and crumbly. And so they went to Joshua in the camp of Gilgal and said to him and the men of Israel, "We come from a distant land. We propose that you make a pact with us." The men of Israel replied to the Hivites, "But perhaps you live among us. How then can we make a pact with you?" What's the problem?
They come in unrecognizable, so they don't know that they're not part of their own community.
Right. Perhaps we don't know who you are.
Right.
Right. We don't know who you are. We don't know where you're from. We don't actually, have any proof that you're who you say. You could be. You could be exactly who you are.
Right.
Or who we know they are, right?
Right.
We've read the text. They said to Joshua, "We will be your subjects." But Joshua asked them, "Who are you and where do you come from?"
Now, would these people look like the Israelites, or would they look? I mean, everyone over there was Middle Eastern, but did they have similar looks? Or that's the thing that always gets me with all this stuff is they recognize them automatically. You go to a different community, here. You go from Pennsylvania to Ohio, we all look the same. Did they all look different over there? Did they dress differently? Because it always seems like they recognize the.
Well, they
outsider.
probably certainly had tribal dress
Okay.
and language.
Okay. It's always struck me in the things, they automatically recognize the outsider in a community of 100,000, 200,000 people.
Right.
How do you automatically recognize the outsider in every single thing we look at?
So literally, it's better if we can do that. That's why.
Okay.
Brad, when you go into a Wegmans, not Wegmans, if you go into the Mill Creek Mall, can you recognize somebody's socioeconomic status just by looking at them?
Not always.
Yes, you can. Come on, based on the expensiveness of their Pittsburgh Steelers jersey.
Did you ever see how I dress, Eric?
No, but I'm serious. Like you can recognize somebody who's of a different socioeconomic status just by looking at them. For the most part, it's not 100% accurate, but
but you know what car they roll up in. You know what they're wearing. You know that by their shoes. There's lots of different indicators that can tell you basically where these people, where their socioeconomic life is. But here we're not talking necessarily socioeconomic. We're also talking.
How do they know that?
No, but my point being is that you do recognize people who are different. Like when when Baghdad was being divided among Sunnis and Shiites, you and I wouldn't have been able to tell who was who. They all knew. And it's just, you know who your local people are, and you know who the local people are who are different.
So you can delineate between the Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites just by looking at them?
Sure.
Can you differentiate between Latinx, Black, bicultural, lower economic status, upper economic status in Erie?
Yes, but I can't tell the difference between a Pennsylvania resident, an Ohio resident, a West Virginia resident, and a New York resident.
But
It's an analogy, Brad.
you're putting state definitions, which we have, Pennsylvania, New York, Ohio, as meaningful in terms of different peoples, and they're not. Right. So what's meaningful is the other stuff.
Okay.
Right. So but in the ancient world, your affiliation with a particular people also related to language and culture and
I
dress.
guess Ohio in that time would have been only made up of one community of whatever, because we didn't blend as much. Okay.
Let me
Now
tell
that
you.
makes more sense.
Let me tell you, you take somebody from Nowheresville, Ohio, and you put them into the middle of New York City, they stand out like a sore thumb.
Right.
And vice versa.
Yeah, I would also think that language, I'm thinking the Canadian differences about, and very small tells like that, but the language would be a giveaway too.
You can tell immediately if somebody's from New York, for instance. I have a friend, she's raised in Brooklyn. And like the way she speaks, you can hear it.
Sure.
And yet she's been here, she's been in Canada for like 30 years, but yeah.
Yeah, I have a friend like that in Georgia. She's from Boston and she never lost the Boston accent. She's been in Georgia like
It's
forever.
not just the accent, it's the way she uses words also.
It's all of it. Language is very, and unless you move when you're very young, under 8 or 9 or something like that, you basically are not going to change your
Right.
language vocabulary unless you really fake it, right? There are people who can then change it, So if you want me to, I can talk in whatever sort of accent you'd like, but some of them, you could whatever. But your natural diction is really quite difficult to change permanently, rather than you adapting your diction, whatever. It also depends on your family of origin stuff, right? So, in my home, I had 4 grandparents and nobody spoke English with the same accent. Everybody had a different whatever. Sure. So if you notice the way I speak, I have a few words that sound Canadian. Most of it is very sort of Parv.
Love it.
Well,
Do you speak Chinese because you live in China or Japan?
my Chinese is limited to menu items.
And counting.
Dim sum. I have to tell you, I spoke with a British accent when I came to Canada because I went to a British nursery school in China. But you soon drop the accent when you're little, and the kids mock the way you pronounce words, so if you're young, it goes away. I mean, you just adapt.
Right.
And so
But there are people who move, I mean, I remember my grandparents were in Canada 60 years and their accents were, still very European.
Mhm.
And the older you are, the more permanent your accent is.
Right. Mhm.
So my great grandmother's accent was thick as thick as thick. She spoke with this classic German, which was fun.
Well, thank you for indulging me, everybody.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got a bit of an alliance brewing here. We've got these all of these groups who are whatever, and then we've got the Gibeonites who are sort of trying to play play a game here. And Joshua basically says to them, who the heck are you? You know, where are you really from? Who are you and where do you come from? And they replied, your servants have come from a very distant country. The fame of the Lord your God. Right. So what are we doing here?
Suck it up.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is, you know, playing essentially into what Joshua has been trying to do, right? This is has been trying to promote the success of the Israelites and all of that. And here we are. This is the way that these people are going to ingratiate themselves, is to actually play right into what Joshua hopes is happening. For
I
we
find
heard, sorry, go
Oh.
ahead.
I think you're going to read the last sentence. Go ahead.
For we heard the report of him, meaning God, of all that he did in Egypt and all that he did to the two Amorite kings on the other side of the Jordan, King Sihon and of Heshbon, and King Og of Bashan, who lived in Ashtaroth. So our elders and the inhabitants of our country instructed us as follows: take provisions for a trip and go to them and say, we will be your subjects. Come make a pact with us. This bread is ours, which we took from our houses. A provision was still hot when we set out to come to you. What's that?
A lie.
No, but
Say
what
lying.
are they?
Oh,
We're
You've come a long,
empathizing.
long way.
They're empathizing,
Oh.
right?
Oh, because you had manna and the unleavened bread.
What did you
and
do when you had to leave Egypt? You had
to-
no time for the bread to rise.
Yep.
Right? Here we go. Same thing.
Now, how did that word get out? Were they
That's
reading-
what I was going to ask. It's
Yeah,
like,
I
how do
was
they
gonna
know
how do they know?
these people were from Egypt?
They
It's
look-
the report that he heard.
They looked it up on the internet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
They had a preview sample of the Torah. They were reading it.
They was not asked God. They forgot to ask God. Did they tell the truth or not? And they should have. They had to read and to mean, and they was able to ask and choose what is right, what is wrong, but they was not. And
Who-
they
Did they
get
ask-
caught into the lie.
Wait a minute, Lou, but we're confused. Who's not asking, or what's your point here?
My point is that Israelites get caught in the lie of these people because their ancestors lied too to achieve certain things. And we know that whatever you do, it is come upon your head back or upon your children. So these people who lie to save their lives was able to lie to them and confuse them to get promised to live. And Israelites had tools to check, but they forgot to check with God if they're telling the truth, if they're really from far land or the close land, and they cut in their lie about the clothes, about the food, that it is very old. That means they walk for a very long time, and they cut in their lie.
Okay, so because Joshua didn't ask God, he asked them. He got stuck in it. He should have asked God rather than asking them if they were who they were. That makes okay. I hear it.
Okay, yep.
Basically,
I
they said we've
think
come
what-
along. Our stuff has dried out. Our clothes have become tattered because we came so far to see you, even though we
Right.
really started around the corner.
Right. So they dressed themselves up as if they had made this big, huge, long journey, when in fact they had come 3 feet down the road.
Right.
They laid it on really thick here.
Yeah. Look, you know, the bread is all dry and crumbly. The wineskins were new when we filled them, and now they've cracked.
And Luba was referring to line 14, which basically says they took him at face value instead of saying, "Hey God, are they telling the truth?" Which they could have done.
But that's unusual. You know, they don't have, that's true, but where have we ever seen that before? I don't believe what you're saying. You don't check with God.
No, it is written a little further. It is written that they forgot to ask God. They had Urim and Tumim, and they was able to use it. And more of that, I think the dreidel is one of the parts, Urim and Tumim.
It
They
could have been.
we
We're
don't
not.
know how to use it.
And line 14.
So keep going. Look at line 14. The men, meaning the Israelites, took their word because of their provisions and did not inquire of the Lord. Joshua established a friendship with them, and he made a pact with them to spare their lives, and the chieftains of the community gave them their oath.
But 3 days later,
Right? So it's essentially saying they didn't check references.
Yeah.
Has,
They
but
didn't verify the story.
my question, well, okay.
What's your question, Sue?
If you read it just as it states, literally, they did not inquire of the Lord. Has that ever been done before? Did we ever have an instance where the people are saying, I'm going to go check with God to see if what you're saying is true? Has that
Yes,
ever
it is
happened before?
reference.
I
It is like
understand.
references when they choose the son, when the son, I forgot whose son, David's or not, was lie and eat before the battle some honey, and after them community was punished. So they choose using Urim and Tumim, they was able to establish that it is he who did the eat, and they're supposed to fight without eating. They look for the David. When they look for the David, they use Urim and Tumim, find the king.
Yeah, but Luba, you're jumping ahead here. We don't have that yet.
No, she asking if it is referenced somewhere. It is in the Torah, several places where it's referenced how they use Urim and Tumim to find. Did they have to go to the battle?
No,
Did
okay,
they have
but up
to
until this
do
point in
things?
the Torah, well, we're now into the prophets, not the Torah, but the Torah itself has no conversation at any point of, it's not like Pharaoh says such and such and such and such, and Moses says, hold on, I have to check with God.
Right.
Or, Jacob says to, these visitors, sorry, hold on, I got to go check with God. Right? That doesn't seem to be the pattern. Right? The pattern seems to be that people say what they say. They essentially are believed. And then we face whatever the consequences are. So this is a little bit different in that in some way, up until now, there would have been no precedent for checking with God. Why would you check with God about these kinds of things?
right?
Now, Moses was talking to God and usually present things to them after he talked to God, what they should or should not do. And they used to it, and they used not to do anything else. And when Joshua became, they used to think that if Joshua is telling them that it is okay, they was not used for Urim and Tumim, but it was used by some priests.
So what happens?
Okay.
I don't remember the places. I need to look.
So let's push on a little.
How
So
did they find out 3 days later?
They went out exploring and they found that they were neighbors.
How did they find that out? They don't say.
It says they went out exploring the neighborhood.
here we go. But when 3 days had passed after they made this pact with them, they learned that they were neighbors living among them. So the Israelites set out, and on the third day they came to their towns. These towns were Gibeon, I don't know whatever these names are, because I can never read transliteration. But the Israelites did not attack them, since the chieftains of the community had sworn to them by the Lord, the God of Israel. So look, they show up, they make this pact. They then go out and they see that these people are living in permanent cities that obviously are not new. and they're certainly not far away. So now they're in a bit of a bind, right? Because they have two choices. They can either nullify the agreement, right? They can nullify the agreement, and then, then they have to deal with whatever the consequences of that are, or they hold the agreement, which is seemingly what they do. Right? The whole community muttered against the chieftains, but all the chieftains answered the whole community. We swore to them by the Lord, the God of Israel, therefore we cannot touch them. Who did they make the promise to?
God,
Yeah,
not to the people that impacted with God.
right? That's a huge piece. They're not worried about betraying people. They feel betrayed by them. They're not worried about the people. They're worried that this oath they swore is going to be in some ways a betrayal of God.
Right.
So now they have to figure out what to do next, right? Because they certainly feel betrayed and all the rest. This is what we will do to them. We will spare their lives so that there may be no wrath against us because of the oath we swore to them, and in effect, God. And the chieftains declared concerning them, they shall live. And they became hewers of wood and drawers of water for the whole community, as the chieftains had decreed concerning them. So essentially, what happens to them?
Slaves.
Yeah.
But it is another very important question. They put them to bring the water, and water is source of life.
Yeah,
And
but this
you usually don't give the enemies carry for your food.
the term the drawers of water, and the cutters of wood really is code for the very lowest menial labor job in society.
Yeah.
Right,
But
this is still
they
job.
They're being punished to the extent of the law without,
Right. We're
within
making them
the-
do the lousiest work in society.
in exchange for sparing their lives
Right.
and whatever. Yep.
Now, regardless of how important water is, water itself is important. The guy who schleps the water, not so
not.
much.
But if it is your enemy, trusting him, the water source of life is very, very, very unthoughtful.
They're not
Because
making them an enemy. They're making them people amongst them because they have a pact. So it's not an enemy. It's just it's a lower part of the community.
Look,
Yeah.
this hasn't essentially changed, right? Talk to any immigrant community, they end up doing,
Housekeeping.
classically, the immigrant communities end up doing the most menial labor jobs until they establish themselves in society, right?
Yep.
My grandfather showed up with a PhD in economics, and nobody would hire him because he was an immigrant.
Mhm.
So eventually he had to actually just drop it out of his resume and whatever to actually get a job.
Yeah. To this day, doctors from other communities
Right.
have to
Driving
start-
taxis,
doctors,
Uber.
Right. To try to get your license, your US license is sometimes made very difficult by professional organizations and everything else.
Mhm.
Sometimes for good reasons,
Right.
right? Because, medicine is practiced differently in different countries and everything else. But sometimes it's just a punitive sort of a thing.
Mhm. So Joshua called them in and said, so why'd you do what you did?
Right. So Joshua, calls them in and says, look, why did you deceive us? And tell us that you live far away when in fact you live around the corner, amongst us.
And by the way, we're Jews. How did you think you'd get away with it?
Right. Therefore, you're cursed.
Mhm.
Never shall your descendants cease to be slaves, hewers of wood and drawers of water for the house of my God.
Wow.
Right? He is not happy.
Yep.
Because he feels very much betrayed and
Embarrassed.
bound,
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
because he's made this oath to God and he can't get out of it. Right? You can't get out of the oath. Once you've made the oath, that's it. It's binding.
Right.
It's the unbreakable bond.
And I love 27. That day Joshua made them
Oh,
heroes of
we're
war.
at 24. What are you
Okay,
jumping
never
ahead?
mind. I
Shush,
I
hold
like
on.
27.
Wait.
Okay, never
Right.
mind.
But they replied to Joshua, "You see, your servants have heard that the Lord your God has promised his servant Moses to give you the whole land and to wipe out all the inhabitants of the country on your account. So we were terrified. We were terrified for our lives because of you. That's why we did this thing."
So the Israelites did a really good job of announcing their intentions. If the word really got out there.
we were terrified.
Mhm.
And now we're at your mercy. Do with us what you consider right and proper. He did so. He saved them from being killed by the Israelites. Who's he?
Joshua,
Probably.
Unless it's God.
Could be
our
God.
God.
Mhm.
Probably Joshua.
Mhm.
That day, Joshua made them the hewers of wood and the drawers of water, as
They
they
still are.
are.
I love that.
I can't help but think that this story somehow is speaking to a system in place, a caste system or something, to explain something that was very evident in the era that this was written.
100%.
Good point.
Yeah. This very much is one of those biblical texts that seems to be explaining a contemporary circumstance.
Mhm.
But a lot of the Torah does that. It explains why things are the way they are.
And that's why I always like the "as they still are" comment, because it's who knows what year this was written, because obviously they're not still that way in 2020, or are they? Do we know? Are the Hivites still water bearers and lumberjacks? I don't know.
It's the opposite, which is it's the excuse for the water bearers and the shit schleppers to say, oh, that's because they were Hittites.
Probably.
That's why they're still doing it.
A pessimistic view.
Who knew?
Yes.
Okay. So this is this moment of saying, okay, you betrayed us. We are bound by the obligation. We're not willing to incur God's wrath to break our vow, but here's how it's going to go.
The Arabs see that. Do they see that as the reason they're impoverished, or the Palestinians or whoever? But I don't know if they read this, but
Well,
be rather disturbing for them. No?
sure. I mean, you could make a modern sort of an comparison, right?
Right.
Traditionally, Palestinians have been that very menial labor market really up to when the second Intifada started, maybe even the first Intifada. It was really everybody had Palestinian laborers. So Palestinians were the ones who did the cleaning and the cooking and the street cleaning and garbage pickup and all of that in most of Israel. And you would have huge numbers of Palestinian laborers who would come through every day, do their jobs, and then go back. A lot of that has changed because of the two Intifada segments and the discourse and whatever in between, but or the discord between. So no longer, and it was a huge crisis in the construction industries and some of the other places. A lot of the service industries had a huge issue cleaning and whatever. you had huge problems. And what actually saved them was a massive immigration from the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union, in the early 90s, which brought a whole group of new immigrants who could fill those roles. But of course, they all came as fairly educated folks, right? They came, the joke, of course, is, every one of them came with a violin case. And the ones who didn't played piano.
That's my piano teacher.
So the people who came from the former Soviet Union came with lots of education. They came as doctors and engineers, and they came with lots of advanced education. They didn't come, in that very uneducated, poor sort of immigrant model, and so of course it didn't help for long term, because they weren't, and so now Israel has been faced with, bringing in migrant labor. So there was a whole fiasco with a whole group of Sudanese who were there. And then Israel said, well, time to go home. And they said, no, we don't want to go home. And then, there was a whole court case and the thing about, because they were gonna send them back, and then and there was this, civil war in Sudan and all this stuff going on. So
I want to make one.
Well, here, I just finished a book set in 1969 New York City. It was talking about the docks and how the Italians came over. The Italians ran the docks, because it was the lowest thing, unloading and loading ships. Well, they built it into an industry where they moved out and then ran the shipping, and they brought in the blacks, who then moved into the projects to do the jobs they didn't want to do. And that's kind of how the whole New York City dock situation changed from the 40s. And it literally talks about how the Italians moved in, the Italians moved out, the blacks moved in, the blacks moved out, and the Jews watched over. So it's always talk about the Jews being up in the next block over watching down. But it's that way, and that's how you explain it. It's because these are the people who need to do those jobs because.
Right. Well, and the garment industry in New York really worked in the same way, right? So the Jews, came in the early part of the century, and provided that garment kind of worker experience. And there's a huge garment industry that grew up around it because they were willing to do it. They were eventually replaced by immigrants from many of the Asian countries. So if you go to the Tenement Museum in New York, you will, there is this great, there's one of the tenements that is set up to do the history of the area. And so you start with I think an Italian family, and then it's a Jewish family, and then it's a Chinese family. And there's this kind of cycle of these immigrants who cycle through. And in each case, those immigrant populations do that menial work for a period of time, and within a generation or two are no longer doing it. And one of the things that we're dealing with now is we don't really have these large immigration waves anymore. And so who's taking these jobs that nobody else wants to do?
South Americans, Mexico and South America.
It's like the farmers.
Have the numbers of people coming in to do them. Right. So because of all the immigration policies and all the other stuff, but we don't have that immigration path anymore. And so there has been, early on they tried to professionalize a lot of those, right, with the garment workers unions and all of that to protect these workers and elevate the thing. The auto industry was most effective at that, right? Right. The auto industry elevated the factory line worker to at different stages, a very, very well-paying, family sustaining position.
Well, and that's why GE is really no longer in Erie, is because of that. Because the people in Erie with GE were doing so well and the union was so strong, they moved it to Mexico. or southern Texas, which is essentially Mexico. And it's because they saw in the past that the only way they could keep skilled workers is to actually reward them for doing skilled work. Now they don't.
And, but, here in this case, because we strayed a little bit from the text.
I would say it's a familiar trope. I think back on Cain and Abel and Hagar and child and how they stayed at the time, and this population went on to be blah-de-blah or accursed or something.
Why are they invoking Moses here?
When they first came over, they said that they had heard all that God had done previously. So they're going into the pact that God had with Moses to give them all the land.
Mhm.
So if they had heard that that was what God told Moses, they knew that it was going to come true. That's why they were so fearful, because of they knew of the pact, which once again, it goes to Sue's comment. How the hell do they know that? I mean, who tells them a pact that Moses made with God 40 years earlier? That's yeah.
Well, okay, so what we're seeing though is that those stories are part of the myth that precedes the people, right? That those stories, which are those mythic kind of reputation, precedes the people into the land.
They didn't have a screening of the Ten Commandments, and you see Charlton Heston out there.
You're right. Moses.
I mean, that's almost what it seems like, though, when you think about it. I mean, going to Eric's sense of humor, but it almost seems like they had an advanced copy of the Ten Commandments, and Charlton Heston and all the miracles and everything else. They came in. We heard about this and we heard of you.
They do. I mean, rumors travel much faster than people. I don't quite understand how, but they do, right? Which is the stories of the people would have arrived long before the Israelites.
For sure.
Good point.
For sure. And really the stories are what keeps the Israelites kind of safe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's nothing but and armies have been doing this forever. If you think about the British Army, right? The bright red coats.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And the Huns.
And the Huns and
Everyone feared the
Genghis
Huns.
Khan.
Right. So you make a lot of noise when you go into battle, and therefore you create fear.
Mm-hmm.
And people who are afraid don't fight as well as people who are on the offensive. So, right, the classic phrase, the best defensive is a good offensive.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because if you are offensive, you are in a very different mind frame. So if you can get people on the defensive, if you can get the army on the defensive, you're halfway there. Right? I mean, this is sort of standard stuff. But what I love in this text as we're going through it is all of the little kind of connected pieces to
Back to Moses.
back to the original story.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to put in your comment, your 2 cents worth?
No.
Okay.
Rabbi, could you share Noah's translation, what we found out in Noah part with people, so they know that translation could be read differently in Noah? If we have time, if not, maybe another time.
So, well, I mean, it's a longer conversation, but hold on. Let me see if I can get to it here.
Very important thing we found in Noah. And with Rabbi's help, his translation approved my feelings, what I thought about the part. And it is put upside down everything that is in the Torah.
No, not that one.
You reverse Noah?
No.
That'd be interesting. won't connect for you.
Hold on. I tried to do an extended screen. Anyway, essentially, there's a section in Noah that you can read in several different ways, including in the commandments about what people can do or their guilt for killing another person. And it also seems to indicate that you are guilty if you have killed an animal.
Okay.
That killing an animal incurs some sort of guilt. And you can read it as all life, so just as chaya, which is either an animal, as it's described in the first part of the creation story, or it's just life in general.
Okay.
And it can be read either way.
Okay.
So the idea that Luba is talking about is the idea that it's a text that is talking about the implications or responsibility or repercussions of eating or killing an animal.
Okay.
And going to the war and everything that we do is we're responsible for. We have, we can do anything, but we need to know that we will be responsible for destroying other life.
Yeah.
It is very important part, because it was translated only in one way. People usually read, oh, you can eat animals, and they don't pay attention to the things that right after this is written. And usually it is when you translate it, you can do this, but you will be responsible.
Right, like most of our, like all of our actions, I mean, we are ultimately held accountable for our actions. So, all right, everybody, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
We'll see you soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I guess I'll see you tomorrow. Yeah, sure. You too. Bye.